I was born Olivia Marie Blackwood, became Olivia Hayes when I married Robert in 1981, and remained that person until 3 weeks ago, the day after we buried him. I'm 68 years old with arthritic hands that still remember how to bake the sourdough bread my daughter Amelia used to beg for on Sunday mornings, and the way my daughter Chloe's hair felt when I braided it for elementary school. I'm telling you this so you understand that before everything collapsed, I was simply a mother who believed she had raised good children. Robert's cancer took 14 months to kill him. Pancreatic, the silent executioner that gives you just enough time to put your affairs in order, but not enough time to actually live with the knowledge. We kept it quiet at first, just between us. Our children were busy with their own lives. Amelia with her financial consulting career in Chicago that seemed to require her to miss every major holiday, and Chloe with her perpetually failing wellness businesses in Miami that somehow always needed another investment from Dad. They don't need this burden yet, Robert had said, staring at the ceiling of our bedroom, the morphine making his words slur slightly. Let them live their lives a little longer without this shadow. I nodded because I loved him. But I knew better. I knew our children. When they finally arrived at our modest farmhouse on the outskirts of Millfield, Florida, the same house where they'd grown up, where Robert and I had built Hayes family orchards from 20 acres of neglected orange trees into one of the most respected organic fruit operations in the state, they didn't come with comfort. They came with questions about the will. "Mom, I'm just trying to be practical," Amelia said, her voice taking on that condescending tone she'd perfected sometime after her first six-figure bonus. We were sitting at the kitchen table, Robert asleep upstairs, when she first broached the subject. "The medical bills must be piling up. Have you two considered downsizing? The business can't be easy for you to manage alone." Amelia had left Millfield at 18, declaring small-town Florida as suffocating as the soil that had paid for her education. She'd visited only when absolutely necessary, usually staying in a hotel rather than her childhood bedroom, because the country air aggravates my sinuses. But suddenly, during her father's final weeks, she developed a profound interest in the family business that had embarrassed her throughout her adolescence. Chloe arrived 3 days later, bringing with her 6 suitcases and the scent of expensive failure. 5 wellness ventures in 8 years. Each one launched with her father's money. Each one abandoned when it required actual work. But she hugged Robert with genuine tears and slept beside his bed the night before he passed, which is why I still struggle with what came after. The funeral was small, just as Robert would have wanted. He was buried on a hillside overlooking the orchards where the spring blossoms were just beginning to show. I stood between my children as they lowered him into the ground, Amelia's arms stiff around my shoulders, Chloe openly weeping into a monogrammed handkerchief I'd never seen before. "He's at peace now," the pastor said. And I wondered if that was true or just something people say when someone dies after long suffering. Robert and I weren't religious, but we'd maintained the social convention of occasional church attendance, enough that Pastor Williams knew to focus on Robert's love for the land rather than any heavenly reward. What I remember most about that day was the silence afterward. The house echoed with it as people dropped off casseroles and spoke in hushed tones about Robert's kindness, his integrity, how he'd helped Mr. Peterson save his dairy farm during the recession or employed the Johnson boys when they needed summer work. Nobody mentioned how he'd built our business from nothing while raising 2 children who seemed to have inherited none of his values. I made up the guest rooms, I told Amelia and Chloe that evening as the last visitors left. "I thought we could spend tomorrow going through some of your father's things together." "About that, Mom," Amelia said, setting down her whiskey glass with a precision that reminded me of her father. "Chloe and I have been talking, and we think it's best if we settle things quickly. We both need to get back." "Settle things." "The estate," Chloe clarified, scrolling through her phone. "The house, the business. Amelia and I need to figure out the next steps." I'd expected grief from my children, perhaps some reminiscing about their father. What I got instead was a boardroom meeting. Amelia opened her laptop on the dining table where we'd celebrated their birthdays, their graduations, their departures. "Dad spoke to me about this last year," she said, not meeting my eyes. "He was worried about you managing alone." The business needs modernization, investment. The house is too much for someone your age. My age, I repeated, the words tasting bitter. I've managed this orchard alongside your father for 40 years. And you've done wonderfully, Chloe said in the same voice she used when selling overpriced vitamins to desperate women. But it's time to think about your future, Mom. A retirement community would give you friends. Activities. I have friends. I have activities. My voice sounded distant even to my own ears. This is my home. It's all of our home, Amelia corrected. And Dad left the business to Chloe and me in the will. He wanted us to take care of you, but he knew the business needed younger management. I stared at my daughter, this stranger in expensive clothes, who thought she knew anything about the earth that had fed her, the trees her father had nursed through drought and blight and frost. Show me the will. She slid a document across the table. Not our family lawyer's letterhead, but something printed on Amelia's corporate stationery. Robert's signature looked wrong somehow, too perfect, too steady for a man whose hands had trembled with pain for months. You had him sign this while he was on morphine? The rage that rose in me then was something primal, something I hadn't felt since I watched a fox try to steal into our chicken coop when the children were small. I'd chased it off with a broom and the kind of fury that comes from protecting what's yours. He was lucid, Amelia insisted. He wanted us to have a fresh start with the business. There's a developer interested in the land. A developer for a luxury housing community, Chloe explained, her eyes bright with the prospect of money. They'll pay $7 million, Mom. We can all start fresh. Fresh? As if the life Robert and I had built was something stale, something to be discarded. As if the legacy of Hayes Family Orchards, our sustainable farming practices, our refusal to sell to the big grocery chains that would squeeze our workers, our annual donation of 10% of our crop to the local food banks was nothing compared to the prospect of cookie-cutter homes for wealthy weekenders from Orlando. Your father would never sell this land for development, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And I didn't sign anything. You don't need to, Amelia explained with practiced patience. The business was in Dad's name. The house too. Florida isn't a community property state. I knew then that they had planned this, not just after Robert fell ill, but perhaps before. How long had my daughter been waiting for her father to die so she could liquidate our life's work? How many times had Chloe called not to check on Robert's health, but to ensure their plan was still in motion? I need time, I said, standing up. I'm going to bed. We'll discuss this tomorrow. But there would be no discussion. While I lay awake in the bed I'd shared with Robert, staring at the ceiling and listening to the familiar creaks of our old farmhouse, my children were making their final preparations. Morning came with the smell of coffee, the expensive kind Amelia had brought from Chicago because our local store brand was undrinkable. I dressed slowly, my joints stiff with grief and age and the cold knowledge of what my children had become. When I came downstairs, they were waiting with a small suitcase I didn't recognize. We packed some essentials for you, Chloe said brightly. Amelia and I thought we'd drive you to look at Sunny Pines today. It's a beautiful retirement community just 2 hours from here. I'm not going to any retirement community, I replied, pouring myself coffee. This is my home. Mom, be reasonable, Amelia said. The paperwork is done. We close with the developers next week. You can't stay here. I looked at my daughter, then really looked at her, and saw nothing of Robert in her face. Nothing of the girl who had once followed her father through the orchard at dawn, asking endless questions about pollination and pruning. Nothing but a stranger who saw me as an inconvenience to be managed. I need my medication from the bathroom, I said quietly. And I'd like to take some photos. Sure, Mom, Chloe agreed, relief evident in her voice. Take whatever personal items you want. We can send the rest later. I moved through my home one last time, touching the worn banister Robert had sanded and revarnished every 5 years. The quilt my grandmother had made that draped across our bed. The window seat where I'd read stories to my children on rainy afternoons. In the bathroom, I retrieved my medications, but also slipped my passport and birth certificate from the hidden compartment in the medicine cabinet, the one Robert had built when we first worried about burglaries in the late 80s. In our bedroom closet, behind Robert's collection of flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of him, I retrieved the small fireproof box containing the one thing my children didn't know about. When I came downstairs, my purse heavier but my heart somehow lighter with resolve, Amelia was checking her watch. "Ready?" she asked, not really a question. I nodded, allowing Chloe to take my arm as if I were already the infirm old woman they wanted me to be. We drove in Amelia's rental car, a sleek black SUV with leather seats that stuck to the backs of my legs. I watched my home disappear through the rear window, memorizing the sight of spring buds on the orange trees, the weathered red of our barn, the stone chimney Robert had rebuilt the summer before Amelia was born. We drove past Millfield's small downtown, past the elementary school where I'd volunteered, past the community center where I still taught quilting on Wednesday evenings. But instead of continuing on the highway toward the larger towns where retirement communities clustered, Amelia turned onto County Road 27, a rural route that cut through farmland before eventually connecting to the interstate. 20 minutes later, she pulled onto the shoulder beside an empty field. The engine idled as she turned to look at me. "This is where you get off, Mom," she said, her voice eerily calm. "The house and business are mine now." "What?" Chloe at least had the decency to look confused. "Amelia, what are you doing?" "What we discussed," she snapped. "Mom's not going to make this easy. She'll contest the will, make scenes, embarrass us with the developer. This is cleaner. But she has her medication, some clothes. There's a gas station about 5 miles up. She can call one of her quilting friends." She reached across me to open my door. "Get out, Mom." I looked at my daughter, searching for any sign of the child I'd loved, and found nothing. Then I turned to my other daughter, whose wide eyes darted between us, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. "Chloe," I asked, but I already knew. She'd go along with her. She always had. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered. "It's just, we need this money. I have debts." I nodded once, gathered my purse and the small suitcase they'd packed, and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder. The spring air was cool, scented with fresh earth and the promise of rain later. I stood there clutching my bag as Amelia drove away without looking back, Chloe's pale face visible through the rear window until they crested a hill and disappeared. No phone, no money, or so they thought. Just my name and what they didn't know I still owned. And that's when I realized I wasn't alone. I was free. Free from pretending these people deserved my love simply because I had given them life. Free from the weight of maternal obligation to children who saw me as nothing but an obstacle. I started walking, not toward the gas station Amelia had mentioned, but toward a future they couldn't imagine. In my purse was my passport, my medication, and a deed. The original deed to 20 acres of land in my maiden name, purchased before I married Robert, before Hayes Family Orchards expanded. The most profitable 20 acres as it happened, which included water rights that any developer would need. My children thought they'd left me with nothing. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The walk to town took nearly 2 hours. My shoes, sensible flats I'd worn for my husband's funeral, weren't made for country roads. By the time I reached Miller's Gas and Grocery at the edge of Millfield, my feet were blistered, and the afternoon sun had burned my neck. I didn't care. Pain has a way of clarifying things, and with each step, my purpose had crystallized. I didn't go inside immediately. Instead, I sat on the bench outside, watching pickups and sedans come and go. Normal people living normal lives who had no idea that Olivia Hayes, who judged their orange pies at the county fair for 20 years, had just been abandoned like roadkill by her own children. Mrs. Hayes. I looked up to see Ray Miller himself, third-generation owner of the store, wiping his hands on his apron. "You all right? You're looking a bit peaked." "Just resting, Ray. Been a long day." He nodded, glancing at my suitcase. "Real sorry about Robert. He was a good man." "Yes, he was." I straightened my spine. "Ray, could I use your phone? I seem to have forgotten mine." "Of course you can." He led me inside, past the beer coolers and snack aisles to the small office behind the counter. "Take your time." I didn't call any of my quilting friends as Amelia had suggested. I called Vincent Hargrove, our family lawyer of 30 years. Olivia, I tried reaching you yesterday. I was surprised not to see you at the reading. My hand tightened on the receiver. What reading? Vincent was silent for a moment. The will reading. Your daughter presented a document, but I had concerns. I've been trying to contact you. I've been indisposed, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Vincent, I need your help and I need discretion. You have both. My office. 1 hour. I'll be there. I bought a cheap prepaid phone with cash I kept hidden in a compartment of my purse. Emergency money Robert had insisted we both carry after getting stranded with a flat tire years ago. I also purchased a bottle of water and a sandwich I had no appetite for. Ray refused to take my money. On the house, Olivia. You need anything else? You just ask. His kindness nearly broke me. Nearly. But I hadn't cried when they lowered Robert into the ground, and I wouldn't cry now. Vincent's law office occupied the second floor of a Victorian on Main Street. When his secretary saw me, her eyes widened. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Hargrove is expecting you. She hurried from behind her desk. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? I'm fine, Helen. Thank you. Vincent met me at his office door, his tall frame stooped with age, but his eyes sharp as ever. He'd been a year behind Robert in school, had handled our business incorporation, our wills, everything legal in our lives. Olivia, he guided me to a leather chair, then sat not behind his desk, but in the chair beside me. Tell me what's happening. So I did. The conversation after the funeral, the suspicious will, the drive and abandonment. With each detail, Vincent's expression darkened. The will they showed you, he said when I finished, was not the will Robert and I prepared last year. Their document is a forgery. I suspected as much. I opened my purse and removed the fireproof box. From it, I withdrew the deed to the original 20 acres. They don't know about this. Vincent examined the deed, nodding slowly. Smart. Very smart. You two were always thinking ahead. Robert suggested putting this portion in my maiden name when we first expanded. Insurance, he called it, in case the business ever failed. And now it's insurance of another kind. Vincent placed the deed carefully on his desk. What do you want to do, Olivia? I met his eyes. I want my home back. I want the business my husband built, and I want my children to understand exactly what they've done. Vincent didn't flinch at the coldness in my voice. Instead, he nodded. Let's start with a place for you to stay tonight. My sister's B&B has a vacancy. Tomorrow we'll begin the legal work. No. I shook my head. I need to move faster than that. The developer is closing next week. Understanding dawned in Vincent's eyes. You're not planning to just go through the courts. Courts are for people with time. Vincent, I have a better idea. That night, in the floral-papered comfort of Rose Hill bed and breakfast, I made my first call. Not to my children. They could wonder where I was, whether I'd reached town or collapsed on the roadside. My call was to Harold Peters, the regional manager of Sunshine Trust Bank, where Hayes Family Orchards had done business for decades. Mrs. Hayes, I'm so sorry about your husband. Thank you, Harold. I'm calling because I've discovered some concerning transactions and I need your help to protect what's left of our business. My second call was to Martin Adams, the agricultural extension agent who'd worked with us for 15 years. Olivia, I was at the funeral but didn't get to speak with you. I know, Martin, it's been chaotic. Listen, I need information about a potential development on farmland in the county. My third call was to Sophia Delaney, editor of the Millfield Gazette and Robert's second cousin. Olivia, how are you holding up? I've been worried. I'm managing Sophia, but I think there's a story you might be interested in about developers, protected agricultural land, and inheritance fraud. By midnight, I had made 7 calls, each one a strand in the web I was weaving. Outside my window, the quiet streets of Millfield slept peacefully, unaware that Olivia Hayes, always the peacemaker, always the nurturer, was planning war. In the morning, I met Vincent at his office with a legal pad full of notes. I need you to freeze the business accounts, I told him. And I need you to file an emergency injunction on any sale of the property based on the fraudulent will. Vincent reviewed my notes, his eyebrows rising. This is comprehensive. I had 40 years with Robert. I know every contract, every client, every detail of that business. I leaned forward, and I'm going to use all of it. Your children won't take this quietly. I'm counting on it. By noon, the pieces were in motion. Vincent had filed the emergency injunction. Harold had frozen the business accounts pending investigation of suspicious activity. Martin had contacted the Environmental Board about protected wetlands on the proposed development site. Wetlands that happened to be on my 20 acres. I sat in Vincent's office watching the clock tick toward 1 p.m. when my children would discover that their carefully constructed plan had hit its first obstacle. My phone rang, the new prepaid one, whose number they shouldn't have known, but Vincent had made sure they'd gotten it. I let it ring 4 times before answering, my voice calm. This is Olivia. Mom. Amelia's voice crackled with barely contained fury. What have you done? I smiled, though she couldn't see it. I've only just begun. Mom, be reasonable. Amelia's voice hardened through the phone. You can't just freeze accounts and file injunctions. Do you have any idea what you're doing to our deal? Your deal. I corrected. Not mine, not your father's. Where are you? Chloe cut in, her voice shrill. Amelia had clearly put me on speaker. We've been worried sick. The lie hung between us like a poisoned cloud. They hadn't called the police, hadn't contacted friends. They'd been too busy finalizing their betrayal. Worried that I survived? I asked, my voice perfectly level. Worried that I didn't conveniently disappear? That's not fair, Chloe whined. Amelia made a mistake. Shut up, Chloe, Amelia snapped. I smiled into the phone. Already fracturing. Listen carefully. I'm giving you one chance to walk away with something. Withdraw your fraudulent will. Sign the business and house back to me. In return, I'll give you each a one-time payment of $50,000. After that, we're done. Amelia laughed, an ugly sound. You're delusional. You have nothing. The will is legal. The will is a forgery, Vincent interjected, leaning toward the speakerphone on his desk. As the lawyer who drafted Robert Hayes's actual will, I can testify to that. Silence stretched across the line. You have 24 hours, I said. After that, the offer expires and I proceed with fraud charges. I hung up before they could respond. Vincent leaned back in his chair. You realize they'll probably refuse. I'm counting on it. I stood gathering my purse. Now I need to visit the bank in person. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and quiet meetings in back offices throughout Millfield. People who had known me for decades, known us, Robert and me, stepped up with information, signatures, and support, not out of pity, but out of respect and perhaps a touch of relish at seeing the Hayes children, who had abandoned their hometown for shinier places, get their comeuppance. By evening, I'd moved into a small apartment above Lucille's bakery. The owner, Lucille Brennan, had been my friend since our children started kindergarten together. Stay as long as you need, she said, pressing the key into my palm. That girl of yours never did right by this town. Or by you and Robert. I slept surprisingly well that night, lulled by the familiar smells of bread and pastry rising from below. In the morning, I dressed in clothes Lucille had lent me, a pair of jeans and a sweater that fit well enough, and prepared for war. At precisely 9 a.m., when the deed office opened, I filed paperwork asserting my ownership of the original 20 acres, property that included the main house, the barn, and most critically, the water access that any developer would need. At 10 a.m., I met with the Agricultural Board about conservation easements Robert and I had quietly put in place years ago, restrictions that would make development nearly impossible, even if Amelia somehow managed to sell. At noon, I sat with Sophia in the Millfield Gazette office, providing documentation for a story headlined, Local Orchard at Center of Inheritance Dispute, Developer Plans Threaten Protected Agricultural Land. By 2 p.m., my phone was ringing again. "The offer's off the table," I said by way of greeting. "Mom, you're making a terrible mistake." Amelia's voice had lost its edge of superiority, replaced by something closer to panic. "The developer's lawyers are threatening to sue if we can't deliver as promised." "That sounds like your problem." "Our problem?" Chloe broke in. "Mom, please. I used the advance to pay off some debts. If this falls through, I'll be ruined. You should have thought of that before leaving me on the side of the road." "That was Amelia's idea," she cried. "I didn't know until we were already driving." The betrayal between them gave me no satisfaction. Nothing about this gave me satisfaction. Only a cold, necessary sense of justice being served. "The bank statements show you withdrew $50,000 3 days before your father's funeral, Chloe." I kept my voice clinical, detached. "Planning your fresh start already, were you?" She began to sob, dramatic, heaving cries I'd heard countless times when she didn't get her way. "It's too late for tears," I continued. "Vincent will send over the paperwork. You both sign, renouncing all claims to Hayes Family Orchards and the house. In return, I won't press charges for fraud, attempted elder abuse, and theft." "And the $50,000? Amelia asked, her businesswoman's mind still calculating. "That offer expired," I replied. "You get to stay out of jail, that's all." I hung up, set down the phone, and stared out the window of Vincent's office at the town where I'd spent my entire adult life. Across the street, the farmer's market was setting up, just as it did every Thursday. People moved about their business, greeting neighbors, examining produce, living normal lives where children didn't abandon mothers on roadsides. "They'll fight," Vincent said, setting a cup of tea beside me. "Let them." I didn't touch the tea. "I have one more call to make." I dialed a number I'd memorized decades ago but rarely used. "Robert, it's Olivia Hayes. I think it's time I called in that favor." Robert Wilson had been Robert's roommate at Florida State before either of them met me. They'd remained friends even after Robert moved to Orlando to start what would become one of the largest real estate law firms in the state. 30 years ago, Robert had loaned Robert money when his first firm collapsed, money that helped rebuild a practice now known for destroying predatory developers. "Olivia," his voice was warm with recognition. "I've been meaning to call since I heard about Robert." "I'm so sorry." "Thank you, Robert. I need your help with the situation." I explained everything: the forgery, the abandonment, the developer. Robert listened without interruption. And when I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "I'll be in Millfield tomorrow morning," he finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "These developers, Platinum Acres, they've been on our radar. Olivia, what they're planning violates at least 6 environmental regulations. We've been looking for a way to stop them. And now you have one." "Yes." I could hear him shuffling papers. "Don't sign anything before I get there. And Olivia, I'm sorry about your children." "I stopped having children 3 days ago," I replied. "Now I just have adversaries." That night, I sat in Lucille's kitchen as she closed the bakery, drinking tea and watching her prepare dough for the morning. "You should try to eat something," she said, nodding toward the sandwich she'd made me. "You need your strength." "I'm not hungry." I hadn't had an appetite since Robert died. Food was fuel now. Nothing more. "Heard Chloe's staying at the Millfield Inn," Lucille said, kneading with practiced movements. "Amelia's still at the house. People are talking. Let them talk." The small-town grapevine had always annoyed my children, but now it served me. Every move they made, I knew about it within hours. "Sophie's article runs tomorrow," Lucille continued. "Front page. Got a call from the Orlando Sentinel, too. They want to pick up the story. Something about the developer having trouble with other projects." I nodded, unsurprised. Robert's call had confirmed what I'd suspected. Platinum Acres had a pattern of targeting vulnerable landowners, particularly the elderly, with promises they never intended to keep. Did I do the right thing, raising them the way we did? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Not sentimentality, but a genuine curiosity about where I had failed. Lucille's hands stilled in the dough. You and Robert were good parents, Olivia. Some people just turn out rotten, no matter the soil they're planted in. I accepted her answer with a nod, pushing away the useless question. It didn't matter anymore. The past was buried with Robert. Only the future and my revenge remained. Morning brought Robert Wilson, impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than 3 months of Hayes Orchard profits, striding into Vincent's office with 2 associates trailing behind him. Olivia, he embraced me briefly, then immediately turned to business. We've filed injunctions against Platinum Acres in 3 counties already. Now we add yours to the list. For the next 2 hours, I watched a master at work. Robert didn't just understand law. He wielded it like a scalpel, precise and devastating. By noon, he had drafted documents that would not only block the sale but potentially trigger a state investigation into the developer. Your children's signatures, he said, sliding papers across Vincent's desk. We need them to officially renounce their claims based on the fraudulent will. Vincent says they're refusing. They'll sign, I said with certainty. They just need the proper motivation. I pulled out my phone and made another call, this one to Thomas Peters, Harold's son and the assistant district attorney for the county. Thomas, it's Olivia Hayes. I'd like to discuss pressing criminal charges. Robert raised an eyebrow but said nothing as I arranged a meeting for later that afternoon. When I hung up, he nodded approvingly. You always were tougher than Robert gave you credit for. Robert knew exactly how tough I was, I corrected. He just never thought I'd need to use it against our own children. Just after 2 p.m., my phone rang again. Amelia. Her voice, clipped and formal. We'll sign the papers, but we want something in writing saying you won't pursue charges. I already offered that yesterday. The terms have changed. What do you want? She sounded defeated, which gave me no pleasure. Be at Vincent's office at 4 p.m. Bring Chloe. I'll lay out my terms then. When they arrived, I was already seated between Robert and Vincent, a united front of legal firepower. My children looked terrible. Amelia unshaven, her expensive shirt wrinkled, Chloe with smeared makeup and hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Neither could meet my eyes. Sit, I said, gesturing to the chairs across from us. This won't take long. Robert slid the documents across the table. Mrs. Hayes has agreed not to pursue criminal charges for the forged will, fraud, elder abuse, and attempted theft of business assets worth approximately $12 million. In exchange, you will both sign these papers acknowledging the will was fraudulent, renouncing all claims to Hayes Family Orchards, the residential property, and all associated assets. Amelia skimmed the document, her face paling. This says we forfeit our inheritance entirely. Yes, I said simply. But that's, Chloe began. Exactly what you tried to do to me, I finished for her. With one difference. I'm offering you a legal way out, not abandonment on a roadside. Mom, please. Chloe's voice cracked. I know we made a terrible mistake, but... Stop. I held up my hand. This isn't a negotiation. Sign or I walk across the street to the DA's office and file charges. Thomas Peters is waiting for my call. At the mention of the assistant district attorney, Amelia's already pale face went ashen. She knew Thomas from high school, another local girl she looked down on who had now surpassed her. You'd really do that? Send your own children to jail? There was genuine disbelief in her voice, as if the woman who had made her favorite cookies and bandaged her childhood scrapes couldn't possibly be this cold, this unforgiving. The woman who would have forgiven you anything died on County Road 27, I replied evenly. You left her in the dust. Amelia looked away first, then reached for the pen Vincent offered. Her signature was shaky but legible. Chloe took longer, tears dropping onto the paper as she signed her name. What happens now? She asked in a small voice. Now you leave Millfield, I said, gathering the signed documents. Both of you today. If I see either of you in this town again, I will press charges regardless of what you've signed. And the developer? Amelia asked, a last attempt at salvaging something. Robert smiled thinly. Platinum Acres will be formally notified that the property is not and was never for sale. They'll also be receiving notification of our intent to file suit for their part in what appears to be a conspiracy to defraud a widow. They left without another word, shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched through Vincent's window as they walked separately to their cars, Amelia to her rental, Chloe to her flashy red convertible that Robert had helped her buy last year. Neither looked back at the office. Neither looked at each other. "It's done," Vincent said quietly, placing the documents in his safe. But it wasn't done. Not yet. The legal battle was won, but the war, my war, had one final act. "I need a ride," I told Robert. "Where to?" "Home." The Hayes farmhouse looked exactly as I'd left it 4 days earlier. White clapboard siding glowing in the late afternoon sun. Robert's rocking chair still on the front porch where he'd spent his last mobile days watching the orchard bloom. Only Amelia's rental car in the driveway marked any change. "Want me to come in with you?" Robert asked as he pulled up behind it. "No, this part won't do alone." Inside, the house was eerily quiet. I moved through the first floor, noting small disturbances. Amelia's laptop on the dining table, a half-empty whiskey glass beside it. Muddy shoes by the door that she would never have left there when she lived here. "Amelia," I called out, my voice echoing through the rooms that had witnessed 40 years of my life. No answer. I climbed the stairs, my hand trailing along the banister Robert had carved by hand our first year in the house. At the top, I noticed our bedroom door ajar, light spilling into the hallway. I pushed it open. Amelia stood by the window, staring out at the orchard, her back to me. The room had been ransacked, dresser drawers pulled out, closet doors open. Robert's possessions scattered across the bed we'd shared for 4 decades. "Looking for something?" I asked coldly. She didn't startle, didn't turn around. "I know there has to be more. Dad wouldn't leave everything to you. Your father trusted me. Something you clearly never learned to do." Now she did turn. Her face twisted with something between rage and desperation. "You've destroyed everything. The deal's collapsed, Chloe's creditors are calling. My firm is investigating why I took so much time off without explanation. Actions have consequences," I replied simply. "Is that what this is? A lesson?" She laughed bitterly. "Always the teacher, even now." "Not a lesson," I corrected. "Justice." I moved to the bookshelf and pulled out an old leather-bound copy of Walden, Robert's favorite book, the one he'd read aloud to me during long winter evenings when the children were asleep. From between its pages, I withdrew a sealed envelope. "Your father wrote this for you the week before he died. I was going to give it to you after the funeral, before I understood what you really were." Amelia reached for it, but I held it back. "Did you even grieve for him? Or were you too busy planning how to profit from his death?" Something flashed across her face. Perhaps shame. Perhaps just annoyance at being caught. "I loved Dad." "You loved what he provided," I corrected. "Security, status, the safety net for your riskier ventures." "What was it this time, Amelia? Another bad investment? Gambling debts?" Her silence was answer enough. "Your father built something that would have sustained generations if you'd had the patience to nurture it." I placed the envelope on the dresser. "Instead, you tried to sell it for quick cash." "The orchard business is dying," she snapped. "Dad was too stubborn to see it, too tied to outdated ways." "The development would have made you rich," I finished, "while destroying everything your father valued, everything I valued. You could have had a comfortable retirement, a condo in Florida. No worries. Except the worry of living with the knowledge that I'd allowed my husband's legacy to be bulldozed for vacation homes." Amelia shook her head as if I were the one being unreasonable. Even now, she couldn't understand. "Take the letter and go," I said. "Read it or don't, but either way, this is the last time you'll set foot in this house." She snatched the envelope and pushed past me without another word. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the slam of the front door, the engine of her rental car roaring to life. Only when the sound had faded completely did I allow myself to sit on the edge of the bed, surrounded by the wreckage of Amelia's final violation. I didn't cry. I hadn't cried since that moment on County Road 27 when I realized my children had become strangers. Instead, I began to put the room back in order, folding Robert's flannel shirts that still smelled faintly of him, gathering scattered photographs, restoring order to the chaos my daughter had left behind. As darkness fell, I moved to the kitchen and made a cup of tea, carrying it to the front porch, where I settled into Robert's rocking chair. Above me, stars began to emerge in the clear spring sky. Below, the orchard stretched into darkness, the trees we'd planted together now mature and strong. My phone rang. Vincent, checking on me. I'm home, I told him. Amelia's gone. And you're all right there alone? I've been alone since Robert died, I replied. The difference is now I know it. 3 months later, I sat in the same chair, watching the summer sun set over an orchard heavy with ripening fruit. The harvest would be good this year, perhaps our best ever. Not that I would handle it alone. The new manager I'd hired, Martin Adams's daughter Lisa, had already proven herself more than capable. My phone chimed with a text from Lucille. Front page again. Thought you want to see. The attached image showed the Orlando Sentinel's business section. Platinum Acres CEO indicted in fraud scheme. The subheading mentioned Hayes Family Orchards as the case that had triggered the investigation, ultimately revealing a pattern of elder exploitation spanning 3 states. I set the phone aside, feeling nothing but a quiet satisfaction. Justice, not revenge, though perhaps they were the same thing after all. Another text arrived. This one from an unknown number. Mom, please. It's been months. Can we talk? See. I deleted it without replying, just as I deleted the 12 before it. Chloe had begun reaching out after the scandal broke, after her creditors took her car, her condo, everything she owned to cover debts she'd accumulated, expecting the windfall from the orchard sale. Amelia never contacted me at all, though Vincent heard she'd been asked to resign from her firm when her connection to the fraud investigation came to light. My children were learning the hardest lesson, that some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. As darkness settled over the orchard, I rocked gently, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, a distant owl, the creak of the chair against weathered boards. In my lap lay a notebook where I'd begun sketching plans for Hayes Family Orchard's future, a farm-to-table restaurant in the old barn, educational programs for local schools, expansion of our organic practices. Robert would have loved these ideas. We'd discussed similar dreams before his illness consumed our conversations with treatments and pain management. I'm doing it, Robert, I whispered to the night air. Everything we planned, everything they tried to destroy. Tomorrow I would meet with the lawyer handling the formation of the Robert Hayes Agricultural Scholarship, a fund for local students pursuing sustainable farming, funded by the profits my children had tried to steal. Next week, I would host the first community harvest dinner, inviting the neighbors and friends who had rallied around me when I needed them most. And in the quiet evenings, I would sit here in Robert's chair, watching over the orchard we had built, the legacy that would continue without our children. Strong and enduring as the trees themselves. Not alone after all, just free. That's my story. Some of you might judge me harsh, unforgiving. Some might call it cruelty to cut off my own flesh and blood so completely. But remember what I told you at the beginning. Betrayal from those you've carried in your heart is a wound that transforms you. It burns away sentimentality and leaves something harder, clearer in its place. My children made their choice that day on County Road 27. I made mine every day after. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. Maybe share what you would have done in my place. Would you have forgiven? Or would you, like me, have chosen justice instead? Either way, remember this. Some people mistake kindness for weakness until they discover too late what strength truly looks like.